WNST, how far away from Baltimore. His heart still resides somewhere over there, Calhoun and Scott Street over in, do you consider it Pigtown? When people say to you, where are you from, Chris? Do you tell them Pigtown or do you say South Baltimore? What do you say?
I say Holland's Market, Union Square.
But that's not Pigtown.
No, it's not. No.
Just making sure. Okay.
No, West Lombard Street is not Pigtown.
Okay.
You got to go south of that area.
Okay. All right. I mean, that's like calling me Berkshire. I'm not Berkshire. I was Colgate. Don't call me Eastwood. Don't call me Essex. I'm Dundalk. All right.
Right.
So we have to watch out. But I just want to place you as the Baltimore guy. People are familiar with you. Most of our listeners are familiar with our friendship going back to the News American. And when I met you, you were a Loyola Greyhound. You obviously wear your Mount St. Joe. You and Jim Schwartz and Mike Freeman and Mark Teixeira and Gavin Floyd, all the rest of them wear it on their sleeve, right? But for where UMBC sits in the whole scope of all of this, you were an SID at University of Alabama, Birmingham, not the Alabama, the Birmingham, and there's a stigma about all that, and there's small schools, and this was the greatest. I got to think about all the stories we've had here in Baltimore, Coppin State, winning Super Bowls and all that. This was the greatest sort of out-of-the-blue 48-hour window of a golden black rainbow over Southwest Baltimore and Catonsville. It's really an incredible story that I don't think any university could prepare for. Right, Chris?
No, you can't prepare for that. I mean, you go in as a 16th seed on the basketball side, and everybody knows the history. It was 0-135, and eventually, like everything else, everybody said, well, we'll never see an overtime game in the Super Bowl. Well, we've seen that. We've seen a lot of things no one would see. And eventually, if you play enough games, somebody's going to get lucky. I mean, Princeton should have been that first a long time ago against Georgetown, and they lost late. But UMBC didn't win that game by the skin of their teeth. They didn't hit a miracle three with 4 seconds to go. It wasn't like, just sort of a happy surprise. This was a team, quite honestly, that dominated Virginia from start to finish, took Virginia completely out of their game. And if you're watching the game and tuning into the game with about maybe 12 minutes to go in the second half, you realize this isn't just winning by 2 or 3. This is winning going away. This is like Secretariat at the Belmont in '72. I mean, it's they've got the overall number one seed in the tournament. Completely by the throat, and they're squeezing. And they didn't let it go for 40 minutes, and it was a tremendous victory. And on the administrative side, the university side, you've got to capitalize on that as quickly as possible. But certainly, if people didn't know who UMBC was or where they were located or the type of university that they are, if you're a parent looking for somewhere for your kids to go to college, you certainly know it now.
Speak to this on all the sports front. I mean, you've worked in sports information. You've worked in the National Football League with the Saints, with the Falcons, communication side, PR side, understanding university presidents as well as team presidents. You work for Mr. Blank. You work for the late Tom Benson as well, and I'll give you a chance to expand upon that later in the conversation. But you know what it's like to be at a UAB when things happen good and things happen bad. And when this good thing happens over the weekend, sort of that preparation that I know Jeff Seidel. We've known him for 35 years. His son was literally the mouthpiece for the university during a critical period. Not an active shooter on campus, the opposite of that. The good thing, the great thing that could happen on a university at that moment to say, here we are, we've arrived, we're on in your television, we are the Cinderella, we're the cool story, we're the team that beat the 1 seed, and this is who we are. And the first thing anyone is doing, certainly a guy your or my age, we're going to the internet and saying, "Where is UCMB? What does that say? What does that mean? What's retriever with the dogs? What are they?" And that's happening around the country in prime time on a Friday night. Boy, the school, from the university president to the coach being the son of a legendary coach, to their star player having a relationship with the president of the university who walked with Dr. King, taking down Thomas Jefferson in Virginia and the 16 and the 1 and the smallest conference in America and the big. I mean, all of these stories that go in that make it the lead story all Saturday morning, all Sunday morning on a heavy news cycle where we're about to have a president implode and our government's about to implode, that UMBC became this incredible feel-good thing all weekend. I don't know what the long term of that is. It probably means they're going to lose their coach, right? I mean, and if this were Florida Gulf Coast, I'd be saying that. So that certainly is in the middle of this. They have a brand new, beautiful building, Chris, that's been open 5 weeks. This is really quite a story for Baltimore, for the university, but it feels like all the parts worked to tell an even greater story over the weekend. And I guess the sad part is that they didn't hit those shots on Sunday night on the basketball side, right?
Yeah, it is. And to speak to the basketball side first, I mean, you're watching the game and you can tell that they're a little bit dead-legged. Kansas State, they're going to come back and look at the game tape, quite honestly, and they're going to watch the first 6 minutes. And UMBC was up 7-0, but they had so many empty possessions.
Could have been 18-2, man, right? Literally.
Exactly. They could have had a 13, 14, 16-point lead very easily against Kansas State, who looked incredibly athletic in the first-round game, and then played basically UMBC's type of game, which was on offense. I would have thought with their athleticism, they would try to run UMBC out of the gym, okay, and force it offensively. And they didn't do that, and they basically were begging UMBC to take the game for that part of the first half, and they sure as heck were begging UMBC to take the game for about 7 or 8 minutes in the second half, and the game is thrown out with 3 minutes to go when you realize the fatigue sets in. You can tell if you're really pumped up before a game, shots are usually very long, okay? When you're tired and dead-legged and you're not using your knees enough, shots tend to come up short and hit the front rim. This is a team that was very good at the foul line against Virginia. They weren't very good in the foul line, especially in the late stages against K-State. But take nothing away from their effort from the basketball court. Now let's advance the story, if you will, to the week.
And that is the bigger story. The bigger story is, what is the fallout? The games are over with now. They're not going to win. Right. They're going to come home. What happens? I mean, I hope something awesome happens. I think they're prepared for that over there. I know those people.
Well, there have been studies that have been done that watching universities that had great basketball success out of the blue has turned into more admissions applications. It's going to certainly turn into more merchandise, and UMBC made moves to copyright some things that they apparently did not have copyrighted, because there's going to be a lot of merchandise that they're going to sell here, okay? And through whatever licensing agreements they have with IMG or CL, Collegiate Licensing, or the other corporations that handle that, they're going to make a good bit of money off of that.
I don't need to buy anything. I already own stuff, Chris, see?
Right, but there are going to be people across the country that are going to buy those shirts. They're going to want to know where they are. There's going to be students that are going to wonder, what kind of programs does UMBC offer? And that's where the university, especially one that's a smaller university like UMBC is, and their staff certainly isn't the size of, let's say, the University of Alabama or the University of Arizona, or a lot of the teams that are in the Sweet 16 basketball-wise are larger, very large public or private universities. UMBC's had to be nimble. We both know Steve Levy, the sports information director. There's been there since I was at Loyola. I knew Steve well during my days there.
And that's who you feel great for. The guy that's been on the court every game for 25 years, and the guy who's always treated me, our staff with the kind of professionalism and friendship, and what's going on with my wife and Pete Caringi, and we've swabbed over there, and my wife has a closet full of UMBC stuff. I mean, we're just thrilled. I'm embarrassed that I didn't make it down to Charlotte this weekend, but I don't know that I could have prepared for that. You know what I mean? Like we weren't prepared for UMBC to even be in the tournament, quite frankly, because Maryland stunk, and most of the teams here locally looked like they had no chance to be in. So to get in is one thing. To go on that kind of a ride, I feel awful that I had such a full weekend and I couldn't just drop everything. But for the Steve Levys of the world, man, I mean that's why you watch this from afar and you love the story, right?
Well, those are the people, and again, I guess the point I was trying to make is, Steve is doing now. He has staff, and he's got a couple of assistants and students and things like that. And the young man who's handling the social media is 27. Has been around the program, graduated from there. But these aren't the types of programs that have 10 assistant SIDs. Okay, like Alabama does. All right, These are people who have to buy in completely because they're doing it by themselves or with a little bit of student help and maybe a full-time assistant or two, okay? They're telling these stories year after year after year, in a lot of cases, disappointing years. It's not the first time that UMBC's been to the NCAA tournament. Certainly it's the second time. And they've built the program, and they've got a beautiful arena over there, and they've been telling the stories. And your department is not as big as a lot of others. And so everybody has to go all in. Everybody has to pitch in. We did the same thing at UAB in the 90s. We had a great coach in the late Gene Bartow. We had several NCAA runs. But everybody was pulling together in the same direction. You feel that same sort of spirit from UMBC, from their president on down. They understand, maybe more than some others, that they are an academic institution first. And, oh, by the way, we happen to have a basketball team that did this now.
And now a soccer team that's been to the Final Four, too.
Right. And they've had a successful athletic program across the board. And, and there's not a lot of expectation in those things. It's not like, the coaches could be under pressure because they didn't make the tournament once every 5 years. I mean, Loyola's looking for a head coach after, Gigi Smith resigned after 5 years, and they didn't have a good run there, but Loyola's struggled here in the last decade or so. I shouldn't say that. They have had success.
Jimmy Patsos. I mean, it takes a special individual. It takes
Correct.
And I would say this old school, it takes a Kenny Cooper, right? It takes someone to come in. And that's why, Towson tried to hire Pat Kennedy at one point, was to put some splash and to bring that in. And, same thing would be said for Morgan State, bringing in a guy who coached at Michigan, a name brand. And now UMBC is its own name brand with a building. And I'm assuming Ryan's going to get an opportunity, right? I mean, I don't speak for him. I hope to have him on this week. I'll have to put him on the hot seat and ask him all those tough questions and whatnot. But that's the trajectory of this industry and this business. Right?
Well, and UMBC is going to make an offer to them. There have already been reports that they're going to make an offer, but within their realm is the quote, which is basically listen, we certainly don't have the resources that other universities do as far as head coaching salaries go. We want you to stay. He obviously does have a long-term deal there already, but that is very easily broken. There's probably very little of a buyout, if any. And, Odom's eventually going to leave. Ryan Odom is going to leave and go on to another university at some point. You'd like to see him stay another year, if possible, but, there's a couple of big jobs that are still open and a couple that may open here. And, you have to weigh that as a coach. I remember in our Bahamas Bowl, which we've talked about, P.J. Fleck, who was the coach of Western Michigan, okay? He came to our game. They were just building the program. They make postseason play. They win a bowl game the following year. They go undefeated in regular season play and go to a New Year's Six bowl, and that's when he decided it was time to leave. And he went on, and he had a possibility at Purdue and took the Minnesota job. And sometimes it has to be the right fit. But what really impressed me about him over the weekend was how well he was, how calm he was in the face of them winning that game against Virginia, and how calm he was when it wasn't going so well against K-State. He obviously knows how to manage student athletes like his dad did for many years, and he learned well from his dad and worked his way up the ladder and didn't really coattail from his dad. He went to other universities and smaller schools, so he's the right fit at UMBC at the moment. And at some point, they'll go on to another coach. Hopefully, he'll stay there a little bit longer. But at the same time, I'm sure UMBC isn't going to be selfish. If there's an opportunity that works for Ryan Odom going forward, they will have to say, listen, thank you for doing what you did for our university, and we wish you well, at your next opportunity.
But it's also a desirable job now for the next person that would step in because the arena's there. There's a little bit of a reputation. It's a conference where something could happen there. It is now a better job than it was before, right?
Yeah, it is. It's in a one-bid league where Vermont has been the class of that league in the last few seasons. But it is possible to get something done there, and when you have a new arena, you have a little bit of excitement behind you, and you get a chance to maybe get some recruits that suddenly will take a look at you when maybe they wouldn't have 6 months ago or a year ago. That's something that's special, and the university gets to capitalize on it. I'm sure there are many meetings across campus today how do we advertise UMBC going forward? I thought it was great that they had a sign up on campus, 135 and 1, and we're the one. You're going to see institutional spots that will reference that effort for years to come and reference what they do academically. And you're going to strike while the iron's hot in the near term. And, as students look at your university, but UMBC will never not be the academic institution that they are. And I learned some things about UMBC that I didn't even know, the grants from NASA that they get, some of the other things that are going on campus. And they're a great, it's a great economic driver for the state of Maryland. It's obviously huge for Baltimore County. And it's something that all Marylanders should be proud of, that they have a well-rounded academic institution like they do at UMBC.
He is Chris Pika. He is a longtime insider with the Saints, the Falcons, and the National Football League, as well as UAB, as well as were you did something at Loyola, right? You were like the assistant to the assistant SID or something like that, right?
Yeah, I was a basketball manager under Mark Amatucci. I worked as the acting sports information director when I was a senior at Loyola in '87, and I worked under Steve Jones, who was a longtime SID there when Steve first got hired at Loyola in '88. So, I understand what it's like to be, and then I moved on to George Washington and the UAB. I understand what it's like to work in institutions that don't have a lot of budget in a lot of areas, and you have to make do with what you have and be creative. And that's why I admire and like Steve Levy so much, because they've had to be creative, and when they've had success happen to them on the athletic fields, they've been ready to capitalize on it and tell those stories. And Steve's a major reason why that's taken place at UMBC.
What's your favorite story of UMBC from afar? I mean, you know more than, you do this for a living. You run around. You're producing college basketball tonight all week long. You'll be doing softball and baseball throughout the spring in all sorts of ESPN trucks and whatnot. You're around colleges a lot more than I am, but you're also outside of this story, and it sort of seeped into your world on Friday and Saturday. What's your takeaway from this whole thing? The Lyles relationship with the president of the university walking with Dr. King. There was just so many other tentacles that made this more interesting than, Virginia lost and they got their ass kicked, right?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of stories. I think you could tell CBS was trying to educate this prior to the second round game about UMBC, the institution, which I thought was tremendous, talking about, the enrollment, talking about where they're located, talking about the fact that it's a Chesapeake Bay Retriever, not a Golden Retriever. That's the mascot of the school. All very simple things that all of us who are from Baltimore know these things, but, it's teaching folks from outside. But this, listen, they had a great Final Four run in soccer, and the people who love college soccer, certainly understand what a huge accomplishment that was for them. But this is something that lives on. This is something that's going to be a huge part of one shining moment after the national champion is crowned in a couple of weeks. It's going to be something that's going to be referenced for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. People are going to forget that they lost the second-round game to K-State. They're going to remember. Those kids will always have that every time they return to the university. The university will always have that as part of their history. And it's something that every year UMBC is going to be mentioned on television going forward. There's always the first one. And after that, the second one is not going to get nearly the publicity the first one did. UMBC will always be the first. It's always part of their history. And it's something that it'll be a point of pride for a long time to come. But it's not the only point of pride that they have over there.
He is Chris Pika. He is Blog and Tackle out on Twitter, and our longtime contributor and partner in crime around here at WNST. By the way, Chris, it would take a lot to knock the Crabtree, Ryan Grant, John Brown, Ozzie press conference off the front page around here, but I haven't talked a whole lot about Michael Crabtree. We're going to. Usually I'm talking about the NFL with you. Usually we're sitting in a Super Bowl together or something like that. I'm headed off to the owners' meetings. We got a busy week next week now. I'm going to be at the owners' meetings in Orlando for 4 days. We got the breakfast with John Harbaugh. We come back. We have head coach Barry Trotz on Thursday night. Thursday afternoon's opening day around here. So feels like a minute ago it was a Super Bowl. Boom, here comes opening day. We got a Final Four coming up, and we got the Capitals in the Stanley Cup. But it's also the wild west of this free agency period where for a couple of days the Ravens took on some aspects of the Orioles that didn't go over so well around here. Ryan Grant to Michael Crabtree. It's been a wild, wild Ravens week on top of everything that's going on down in Catonsville.
Yeah, I mean, I thought about that when Grant's physical was failed, quote unquote, by the Ravens, and the Ravens made that public. It reminds me of a few times when maybe a few pitchers had their physicals failed by the Orioles, and that becomes public knowledge, and that makes that particular athlete damaged goods to other teams, wondering what the Ravens found or what the Orioles found in those cases. I don't think it was a great look for the Ravens, but in the cutthroat world of the NFL, Ozzie Newsome in a lot of ways is no different than the other 31 general managers. The Ravens will swear up and down that it was on the up and up, that they found something and then they voided the contract. All well and good, and again, it's private medical information. Whatever's made public is made public, but I don't think reputationally, I don't think it was a good look for the Ravens. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the Ravens got what they wanted. They got Michael Crabtree under contract and with the team, and that was an upgrade. And however the Ravens want to spin it, that's fine. But the Ravens did a move that the other 31 teams probably would have done as well.
Is that shady in your mind? I mean, from the agent side, from the industry side, there is a part of that if you flunk the kid's medical just to get another player, boy, that sort of permeates the air around you a little bit for the agents, right? That makes it a little more difficult to do business if that's a fact or if that's a perception. And I'm not here to impugn the integrity of Ozzie Newsome or anybody involved in all this, but it certainly was a little fishy, right?
Well, I'll say this, and I say this about a lot of stories. I say this on Twitter a lot of times. Sometimes you have to let stories breathe, okay? And in other words, what I mean by that, you have to let a little bit of time pass and people ask questions, and eventually you'll get closer to the truth than what sort of the timeline looked a certain way may not be what it was, and only time is going to tell that, and people asking questions or writing stories on it. We may find out a better idea of the truth in 1 month or 2 months or 3 months than we do right now. Okay, all we have is what the Ravens are saying is something triggered a failed physical. Obviously that can't please the athlete. It can't please Ryan Grant. It can't please his agent. He's got to talk to other clubs. But also we also remember this too. If that's on Ozzie Newsome, and they did, again, we don't know this, but Ozzie's out the door in a year. He's no longer the decision maker in a year. They got what they needed, and the next time that the agents will sit with the general managers about deals for the Ravens, they will not be sitting across from Ozzie Newsome. They'll be sitting across from Eric DeCosta. So it's, a plausible deniability in some cases will probably be a good thing. But also, this isn't something that the Ravens, I mean, if we're talking about this, it's because it's a rare occurrence. And it's not something that's a normal fact of life that, let's say, what the Orioles do with their physicals, especially with pitchers. It's a different story. It's one time as opposed to a pattern. So that leads me to believe that maybe there's more to the story. But again, none of us know that. We're all speculating and throwing darts. But let's see what the next few months hold as far as that story is concerned. But the bottom line is Michael Crabtree is a Raven and Ryan Grant's not.
Chris Pika can be found out on the interweb at Blog and Tackle. He's always up on college sports as well as the NFL, and certainly the behind the scenes and peeling back the onion, which has made him a great guest here to talk all things UMBC in the gold afterglow of wearing Cinderella's slipper down in Charlotte. Chris, always a pleasure to have you aboard. I know you're looking forward to opening day. You're a pretty large Oriole fan aside from all of this. Not a lot of hope being sold around here. Anything you want to pile on? Because I'll call you in a couple of weeks and we can bitch about the Orioles then.
You know what? It's a fresh season when you get to April 29th and
March 29th. You mean? Yeah.
Yeah, March 29th, I should say. And it's we're rapidly coming up on it. But that's why you play the 162. I mean, it's we've had a lot of years where the Orioles were not expected to do much, and Buck Showalter has made some miracles happen. And so you have to let those things play out. Yes, on paper, it doesn't look like it's going to be a great year. It may turn out that way, or maybe Buck's got one more miracle left in his bag with the guys that he's going to bring to Baltimore to start the season. So, that's why you play the games. There's obviously a lot of optimism in New York with the lineup they have, but they have a rookie manager. Boston is upgraded. Toronto, I think, is kind of sold and gotten out of the game for a little bit. There are a lot of larger questions about Major League Baseball and what's happened to free agents here in this off season.
Collusion and tanking. It's wonderful to be accused of both, right?
Well, the owners paid a lot for those for previous collusion claims and all of that, and tanking in Major League Baseball is kind of an interesting concept considering. I watch a team here in Atlanta when I'm working games down at the Hawks do it most every night. What they're trying to do to get more ping pong balls in the NBA draft. So to see that in baseball is a little bit different, and it's certainly something that a lot of us aren't really used to overall, watching it as a league, not necessarily your specific team that you root for. And that's something that maybe, we always talk about unintended consequences. There obviously were some unintended consequences from the last CBA the teams are taking advantage of. And that's something they're probably going to address the next time they sit down and have labor negotiations. So I don't think that's good for the game that it happens. The clubs are looking at it that way. I think you should try to put your best team forward that you can afford in your market so that fans come out to the games and enjoy those games and know that you're doing your best to put a winner on the field. That's something that's distressing to me as an overall baseball fan, not just as an Orioles fan.
No, why give Lance Lynn $12 million and we can keep it for ourselves and pitch Mike Wright or whomever, right? So I mean,
right.
that's the question. On this, with Corbin Burnson, these team of turds. What are we going to do here? We're going to win 80 games, whatever. I know I speak for all Oriole fans when I say I'm really looking forward to the Brady Anderson years here. So. Oh boy! Chris, we'll see you soon, man. Stay in touch. Enjoy the college basketball you're doing this week, my pal.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You got it. He is Blog and Tackle out on Twitter and also with the Pro Football Writers Association and taking care of all their PR needs as well. A sage resource when it comes to things like talking about Steve Levy and UMBC. He is Chris Pika and Blog and Tackle. You can find me out in the buy at Toyota.com Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world, talking tons of UMBC. We're going to get some Michael Crabtree in. I'm going to the owners' meetings this week in Orlando. We have head coach Barry Trotz joining us next Thursday night at Michael's Cafe in Simone. We'll be swabbing for the Bone Marrow Registry and for There Goes My Hero. Show starts at 7:30. You may know March 29th is opening day. That's next Thursday. So if you're going to opening day, stop by on the way back. Say hello to Coach Trotz. Have a crab cake. Grab a meal and some suds. And it'll be a big hootenanny on Thursday the 29th with head coach Barry Trotz as we talk some Stanley Cup. Let's see here. The morning newspaper delivers directly to your email inbox each and every morning at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness at planetfitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life guaranteed. And in our morning newspaper, we now have the Laurel entries. You cure your winter blues and the bad weather this weekend down in Laurel. We had some stakes races last weekend, some more this weekend as we get ready for the racing season, and Justify as the Derby favorite right now in the hopefuls. You can go check that out. Bob Baffert back involved in Derby proceedings. The Preakness, of course, 7 weeks out now in the Pink Weekend. You'll be hearing more about that as we get up on it, as the Maryland Jockey Club is our partner. If there is any breaking news, and there was a lot of that last week, Ryan Grant in, Ryan Grant out, Michael Crabtree in, UMBC, all of that comes to you first on the WNST text service. You get your breaking news. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Of course, Dennis Colatzos will be here from 3 until 5. It is the SSV on WNST. All of our WNST programming brought to you by Howard Bank, a relentless commitment to being the best at everything they do. There are branches now throughout the Baltimore area. Anywhere you are, Howard Bank is there and always expanding. And I want to give some love to Pizza John's. I get my cup here on the Facebook TV live channel and our YouTube WNSTV channel. Pizza John's, 113 Back River Neck Road. I just make the right at Joe's and Hands Corner. I still call it that. Essex, Maryland, 50 years on the east side of town. I should have taunted Chris Pika because I like to taunt him with things like Pizza John's and crabs and stuff that he can't get down in Atlanta. Pizza John's, stop in. If you haven't been there in a while, you haven't been there. If you've been there lately, you know what I'm talking about. And if you're from like the west side of town or in the Hereford zone and you've never experienced the joys of Pizza John's, well, you're missing out. You need to get to Essex. It's as simple as that. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Our Ray Lewis trip is still on sale and selling well. So if you need some information on that this week, I am around. We're going to be in Orlando for the owners' meetings next week, opening day at Coach Trott's. Big week next week. Lots of great radio this week. And big tip of the cap to our friends at UMBC for really giving us a little magic carpet ride over the weekend. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.